when lightning struck her heart. The thunder crashed so hard that the windows of Dante's garage shook like they might shatter. He wiped grease from his hands with an old rag, glancing at the clock on the wall. Nearly midnight, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. The rain hammered against the metal roof like 1,000 angry fists, and lightning split the sky every few seconds, casting eerie shadows across the tools scattered on his workbench. Dante Rivers had been working late again, trying to finish the engine rebuild for Mrs. Henderson's old pickup truck. The extra money would help cover Mia's school supplies for the coming semester. Being a single father meant every dollar counted, and sleep was a luxury he couldn't always afford. As he reached to turn off the overhead lights, a flash of lightning illuminated something near the entrance to his garage. He squinted through the rain-streaked window and saw what looked like a person hunched against the wall, completely soaked and shivering. "What the hell?" Dante muttered, grabbing his jacket from a hook near the door. He stepped out into the storm, immediately feeling the cold rain soak through his clothes. "Hey, you okay over there?" The figure looked up, and Dante's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, probably in her mid-20s, with long, dark hair plastered to her face and the most striking green eyes he'd ever seen. She was wearing what had once been an expensive-looking dress, now torn and muddy from whatever ordeal had brought her here. "I'm sorry," she called out over the thunder, her voice trembling from cold and exhaustion. "I didn't know where else to go. I saw your light and thought maybe you might still be open." Dante looked her over quickly. She was clearly in trouble, possibly hurt, and definitely not dressed for walking around in a storm like this. His protective instincts kicked in, the same ones that had made him such a devoted father to Mia. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the garage. "Get out of this rain before you catch pneumonia." She hesitated for a moment, as if weighing her options, then hurried toward him. As she got closer, Dante noticed she was limping slightly and had a small cut on her forehead that was bleeding. "Thank you," she said as they ducked inside the garage. "I know this looks strange, showing up here like this." Dante closed the door behind them and grabbed a clean shop towel, handing it to her. "Here, dry off a bit, and don't worry about strange. I've seen stranger things in 28 years. She accepted the towel gratefully, dabbing at her wet hair and the cut on her forehead. "I'm Celestine," she said softly. "Dante. And you're hurt." He gestured to her forehead. "That needs to be cleaned. I've got a first aid kit in the office." As he led her to the small office space at the back of the garage, Dante couldn't help but notice how gracefully she moved, despite her obvious exhaustion and injury. There was something elegant about her, something that seemed out of place in his grease-stained world of carburetors and tire irons. "Sit down," he said, pulling up a chair for her near his desk. The office was small but clean, with pictures of Mia covering one wall and automotive magazines stacked on every available surface. Celestine sat carefully, wincing as she settled into the chair. Her eyes wandered around the office, taking in the photos. "Is that your daughter?" she asked, nodding toward a picture of Dante and Mia at the county fair from last summer. "Yeah, that's Mia. She's 7. Dante's voice softened with obvious love and pride as he opened the first aid kit. "She's staying with her grandmother tonight, thank God. This storm would have scared her." "She's beautiful," Celestine said, and there was something wistful in her voice. "You can see how much she loves you in her smile." Dante felt a strange flutter in his chest at her words. He'd gotten plenty of compliments about being a good father over the years, but something about the way Celestine said it, with such genuine warmth, affected him more than usual. "Hold still," he said, approaching her with antiseptic and a cotton swab. "This might sting a little." As he gently cleaned the cut on her forehead, Dante became acutely aware of how close they were. He could smell her perfume beneath the rain and mud, something expensive and floral that seemed completely at odds with her current bedraggled state. Her skin was soft under his touch, and when she looked up at him with those incredible green eyes, he had to force himself to focus on the task at hand. "So what happened to you out there?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual as he applied a small bandage to her cut. "Car breakdown? Get robbed? Because if someone hurt you, I can call the police." Celestine's expression darkened slightly. "No police," she said quickly. "Please, it's complicated." Dante studied her face, recognizing the look of someone running from something. He'd seen it before in his own mirror during the dark days after Mia's mother had left them both without a word. Sometimes people needed space to figure things out on their own terms. "Okay," he said simply. "No police. But you can't stay here all night. I live about 10 minutes away. You're welcome to crash on my couch until the storm passes if you want. I promise I'm not some creep trying to take advantage. I just can't leave you here alone." Celestine looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to read his soul through his eyes. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her, because she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. "I know you don't know me from anyone, and this situation must seem crazy." "Lady, I work on cars for a living and raise a 7-year-old girl by myself," Dante said with a small smile. "Trust me, I've learned to roll with crazy." 20 minutes later, they were driving through the storm-lashed streets in Dante's pickup truck. The windshield wipers could barely keep up with the rain, and every few seconds lightning would illuminate the world in stark black and white. Celestine sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out at the storm with an expression Dante couldn't quite read. "You sure you don't want to call someone?" he asked as they turned onto his street. "Family? Friends? Someone's probably worried about you." "There's no one," she said quietly. "At least no one I want to talk to right now." Dante's house was a small 2-story colonial that he'd bought shortly after Mia was born. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. He'd spent weekends fixing it up, painting rooms and building shelves, creating a warm space where his daughter could grow up feeling loved and safe. "Welcome to Casa Rivers," he said, as they hurried up the front walk through the rain. "It's not much, but it's dry and warm." As they stepped inside, Celestine looked around with obvious surprise. The living room was comfortable and lived in, with family photos on the mantel and Mia's drawings taped to the refrigerator in the adjoining kitchen. Everything was clean and well-maintained, clearly the home of someone who took pride in caring for his family. "It's wonderful," she said, and meant it. "It feels like a real home." "As opposed to what?" Dante asked, hanging his jacket on a hook by the door. "As opposed to a house that's just for show," she replied without thinking, then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, you can tell a family actually lives here. It's warm." Dante pulled some towels from the linen closet and handed them to her. "Bathroom's upstairs if you want to shower and warm up. I think I might have some of my ex-girlfriend's clothes around somewhere that would fit you." "Ex-girlfriend?" Celestine asked, and was surprised to find herself hoping the relationship hadn't ended recently. "Ancient history," Dante said with a wave of his hand. "She decided about a year ago that dating a guy with a kid wasn't for her. Her loss, Mia's gain. That little girl doesn't need anyone in her life who doesn't appreciate how special she is." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Celestine's heart do a little flip. She'd never known anyone who spoke with such unconditional love about another person. In her world, relationships were transactions, love was conditional, and family came with strings attached. "I'll be right back," Dante said, disappearing upstairs. Celestine heard him moving around, opening and closing drawers. When he returned, he had a soft sweater and a pair of jeans in his hands. "These should fit," he said. "Take your time. I'll make some coffee." As Celestine headed upstairs, she caught glimpses of Mia's room through an open doorway. The walls were painted soft yellow, and the bed was covered with stuffed animals. Artwork and school certificates were displayed with obvious pride, and a bookshelf overflowed with children's books and picture frames. In the bathroom, Celestine finally got a good look at herself in the mirror. She was a mess. Her expensive dress ruined, her makeup long since washed away by the rain. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel the crushing weight of expectations and obligations pressing down on her shoulders. The hot shower felt like heaven, washing away not just the dirt and rain from her ordeal, but some of the tension she'd been carrying for so long. As she dried off and slipped into the borrowed clothes, she thought about Dante downstairs making coffee. This kind stranger who'd taken her in without question or judgment. When she came back downstairs, she found him in the kitchen, 2 steaming mugs waiting on the counter. He'd changed into dry clothes himself, a simple t-shirt and jeans that showed off his lean, muscular frame. His dark hair was still damp from toweling it dry, and there was something incredibly appealing about how natural and unpretentious he looked. "Feel better?" he asked, handing her one of the mugs. "Much, thank you." She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, inhaling the rich aroma. "This is perfect." They sat at his small kitchen table, the storm still raging outside, but seeming somehow less threatening from inside this cozy space. Celestine found herself really looking at Dante for the first time, taking in the laugh lines around his eyes, the strong hands wrapped around his coffee mug, the way he seemed completely comfortable in his own skin. "So," he said after a moment of comfortable silence, "want to tell me what you're running from? And don't say you're not running because I recognize the look." Celestine hesitated, unsure how much she could safely reveal. "Let's just say my family has certain expectations about how I should live my life, and I've decided I don't agree with them." "Ah," Dante nodded knowingly. "The old your life isn't really your life situation. Been there, have you?" "In a different way, maybe. When Mia was born, everyone had opinions about what I should do. Give her up for adoption, move back in with my parents, find some woman to marry just so she'd have a mother figure. Everyone knew better than me what was best for my daughter." "But you didn't listen to them?" "Hell no. Mia's the best thing that ever happened to me. I wasn't about to let other people's fears or judgments take that away from either of us." Celestine felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. Here was someone who understood what it meant to choose your own path, even when it was harder than taking the easy way out. They talked until nearly 3 in the morning, sharing stories and finding surprising connections despite their different backgrounds. Dante told her about building his business from nothing, about the challenges and joys of single parenthood, about his dreams of expanding the garage and maybe teaching Mia to work on cars when she got older. Celestine found herself being more honest than she'd been with anyone in years, talking about feeling trapped by wealth and expectations, about wanting to find work that felt meaningful, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who only cared about what she could do for them. "You know," Dante said as the storm finally began to quiet outside, "I could use some help at the garage. Someone to handle the books, maybe answer phones and deal with customers. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work." Celestine looked at him in surprise. "You'd hire me? You don't even know my last name." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're smart, you're kind, and you need a fresh start. Sometimes that's all you need to know about someone." As Celestine settled onto the couch with the blankets Dante had brought her, she stared up at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened. In the space of one stormy night, her entire world had shifted. She'd found refuge not just from the weather, but from the emptiness that had been consuming her life. Upstairs, Dante lay in his own bed, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. He kept thinking about those green eyes, the way Celestine had smiled when he talked about Mia, the genuine interest she'd shown in his simple life. He'd been attracted to women before, but this felt different somehow, deeper, more real. Neither of them knew that outside, a black sedan was parked at the end of the street. and the man inside was making phone calls about a missing heiress who'd been spotted entering a modest house on Maple Street. Neither of them knew that their peaceful night was about to be shattered by the very world Celestine had been trying to escape. But for now, for these precious few hours, they were just two people who'd found something unexpected in each other. And sometimes, that's how the most beautiful love stories begin. Part 2. The Truth Behind Her Eyes. 3 weeks had passed since that stormy night, and Celestine had settled into a rhythm at Rivers Auto Repair that felt more natural than anything she'd ever done in her privileged life. She arrived each morning at 7 sharp, brewing coffee and organizing the day's appointments while Dante worked on the early repair jobs. Her quick mind had taken to the bookkeeping like she was born for it, and customers loved her warm smile and genuine interest in their stories. What surprised her most was how easily she'd adapted to the simple pleasures of this new life. Sharing lunch breaks with Dante in the garage office, listening to him talk about carburetors and transmissions with the passion other men reserved for sports or politics, helping Mia with homework at the kitchen table while dinner simmered on the stove. These small moments felt more precious than all the charity galas and society parties she'd ever attended. "Miss Celestine, can you help me with this math problem?" Mia called from the living room where she was sprawled on the carpet with her schoolwork spread around her. "Of course, sweetheart," Celestine replied, setting down the inventory report she'd been reviewing. She'd grown to adore Mia over the past weeks, charmed by the little girl's curiosity and the way she looked at the world with such wonder and enthusiasm. As she knelt beside Mia on the floor, Dante emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee. He paused in the doorway, watching them together with an expression that made Celestine's heart skip a beat. Over the past 3 weeks, the attraction between them had grown stronger, though both had been careful not to rush things because of Mia. "You know," Mia said, looking up from her math worksheet, "I was thinking maybe Miss Celestine could come to the school carnival with us next Friday. Jenny's mom and dad are both coming, and Tommy's whole family will be there." Dante and Celestine exchanged a glance over Mia's head. They'd been dancing around the growing feelings between them, but Mia's innocent suggestion highlighted what they'd both been thinking about more and more. "Would you like to come?" Dante asked quietly, his eyes holding hers. "I mean, if you don't have other plans." "I'd love to," Celestine said, meaning it completely. "It sounds wonderful." That evening, after Mia had gone to bed, Dante and Celestine found themselves on the front porch swing, sharing a bottle of wine and talking quietly under the stars. The air was warm and filled with the scent of the honeysuckle that grew along the fence. "I need to tell you something," Celestine said, her voice uncertain. Over the weeks, her feelings for Dante had deepened into something real and powerful, and the weight of her deception was becoming unbearable. "You can tell me anything," he said, reaching over to take her hand. Before she could respond, the sound of car doors slamming made them both look toward the street. 3 black sedans had pulled up in front of the house, and men in expensive suits were getting out. Celestine's blood turned to ice as she recognized the tall, silver-haired man stepping out of the lead vehicle. "Oh, God," she whispered, instinctively moving closer to Dante on the swing. "He found me." "Who found you?" Dante asked, immediately alert. "Celestine, who are these people?" Victor Sterling approached the porch with the commanding presence that had made him one of the most feared businessmen in the country. His cold blue eyes took in the modest house, the swing where his daughter sat holding hands with a working-class mechanic, and his expression grew thunderous. "Celestine Evangeline Sterling," he said, his voice cutting through the night air like a blade. 3 weeks. 3 weeks I've had private investigators, police contacts, and security firms looking for you. And I find you here, playing house with a grease monkey." Dante felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Sterling. He knew that name. Everyone did. Sterling Industries, Sterling Foundation, Sterling this and Sterling that plastered across half the buildings in the city. And Celestine was Victor Sterling's daughter, the heiress who disappeared from her engagement party 3 weeks ago, making headlines across the country. "Hello, Father," Celestine said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I see you haven't changed." "Get in the car," Victor commanded. "Now! This ridiculous rebellion ends tonight." "No," Celestine said firmly, standing up but keeping her hand in Dante's. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Victor's laugh was cold and humorless. "You think you have a choice? You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities, your family, your entire life to play at being normal?" Dante finally found his voice, standing up beside Celestine. "She's not playing at anything. She's working hard, contributing, making a life for herself." Victor's gaze shifted to Dante with obvious disdain. "And you are?" "Dante Rivers. I own the auto repair shop where your daughter works." "Works," Victor repeated with contempt. "My daughter doesn't need to work. She has a trust fund worth more than you'll make in 10 lifetimes. "Maybe that's the problem," Dante said quietly. "Maybe she wants to earn something that's actually hers." The front door opened, and Mia appeared in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Daddy? What's all the noise?" Celestine's heart clenched as she saw the confusion and fear on the little girl's face. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid, bringing her father's world crashing into this peaceful life they'd built together. "It's okay, sweetheart," Dante said, moving to scoop Mia into his arms. "Just some visitors. Go back to bed and I'll be up to tuck you in again in a minute." But Victor wasn't finished. "Is this the life you want, Celestine? Scraping by in a tiny house, raising someone else's child, wasting your education and breeding on a man who can't even provide properly for the family he already has?" "Don't you dare," Celestine said, her voice sharp with anger. "Don't you dare talk about them like that. Dante has provided more love and security for Mia than all your money ever provided for me." "Love doesn't pay for college," Victor snapped. "Love doesn't provide health care or security or a future." "You're right," Dante said quietly, setting Mia down and gently steering her back toward the house. "Love doesn't pay for college, but it makes a kid want to go to college. It makes her believe she's worth investing in." He turned back to Victor with steady eyes. "I may not have millions in the bank, but I've never once made my daughter feel like her love was conditional on her performance. Can you say the same?" Victor's face flushed with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I've given Celestine everything." "Everything except the freedom to choose her own life," Celestine said. "Everything except the right to make her own mistakes and find her own happiness." "Happiness," Victor scoffed. "You think this is happiness, living paycheck to paycheck, working with your hands like common labor?" "Yes," Celestine said without hesitation. "I've been happier these past 3 weeks than I ever was in that gilded cage you call a life." Dante felt his world tilting off its axis. The woman he'd fallen for, the woman who'd become part of his family, was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She was from a world so far removed from his own that they might as well be different species. What could he possibly offer someone who could have anything she wanted? "I think you should leave," he said to Victor, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Oh, I'm leaving," Victor said with a cold smile. "And I'm taking my daughter with me. Celestine, you have exactly 10 seconds to get in that car. Or I'll make sure this little fantasy life of yours becomes a nightmare for everyone involved." "What do you mean?" Celestine asked, though she dreaded the answer. "I mean that Mr. Rivers here has been operating his business with some rather creative interpretations of city building codes and environmental regulations. One phone call from me, and the city inspectors will be here tomorrow morning. I doubt his little shop would survive the scrutiny." Dante felt the blood drain from his face. The garage was everything to him: his livelihood, his future, Mia's security. He'd worked within the gray areas of some regulations, things that everyone in the business did to stay competitive, but if someone wanted to make trouble. "You can't do that," Celestine said, but they all knew he could. "I can do anything I want," Victor replied. "I own half the city council and have dirt on the other half. One mechanic with a bleeding heart won't even be a speed bump." Celestine looked at Dante, seeing the defeat creeping into his eyes. She could see him pulling away, the walls going up as he realized exactly what he'd gotten himself into by caring about her. "There's more," Victor continued relentlessly. "That custody arrangement you have with your ex-wife? The one where she signed away all parental rights? Funny how easily those things can be challenged when you suddenly appear to be an unfit parent with a failing business and questionable associations." "You bastard," Dante said quietly, but there was no fight left in his voice. Celestine felt her world crashing down around her. She looked at the house where she'd found love and acceptance, at the man who'd shown her what real partnership looked like, at the little girl who'd called her Miss Celestine with such trust and affection. "Give us a minute," she said to her father. Victor checked his expensive watch. "You have 5 minutes. Then we leave. One way or another." As Victor and his men retreated to their cars, Celestine turned to face Dante. The distance between them felt vast, despite the fact that they were only a few feet apart. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to put you and Mia in danger." Dante ran a hand through his hair, looking older than his 28 years. "Jesus, Celestine, Sterling Industries, you're worth more money than I can even comprehend." "The money doesn't matter," she said desperately. "None of that matters. What we have here, what we've built together, that's real." "Is it?" Dante asked, and the doubt in his voice cut her like a knife. "How do I know what's real anymore? How do I know you didn't just see me as some kind of exotic experiment, slumming it with the working class?" "You know me better than that," she said, tears streaming down her face. "These past 3 weeks, the woman you've gotten to know, that's who I really am. Not the heiress, not the society princess. Just me." Dante wanted to believe her, wanted to pull her into his arms and tell Victor Sterling to go to hell. But the weight of responsibility for Mia's future pressed down on him. He couldn't risk his daughter's security, her home, her stability, for what might be nothing more than a rich girl's rebellion. "Maybe you should go," he said quietly, the words tearing his heart apart even as he spoke them. Celestine felt something die inside her chest. "Is that what you really want?" Dante looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her face, knowing he'd never see her again. "What I want doesn't matter. I have to think about Mia." "Time's up," Victor called from the street. Celestine took a step toward Dante, wanting to touch him one last time, but he stepped back. The rejection was like a physical blow. "I love you," she whispered. "Both of you. These 3 weeks have been the best of my entire life." "I love you too," he admitted, his voice breaking. "That's why I have to let you go." Celestine walked toward the waiting cars on unsteady legs, feeling like she was walking to her own execution. As she reached the street, she turned back one last time to see Dante standing on the porch, silhouetted against the warm light spilling from their home. "This isn't over," she called out, finding strength in her voice. "I'll find a way back to you, both of you." Victor's hand closed around her arm, guiding her into the car. "No, my dear. This pathetic chapter of your life is over. Tomorrow we announce your engagement to Jonathan Whitmore, and by Christmas you'll be married and settled into the life you were born for." As the sedan pulled away from Maple Street, Celestine pressed her face to the window, watching the little house disappear into the darkness. Inside her chest, her heart was breaking, but alongside the pain was something else: determination. Her father thought he'd won, but he'd underestimated the woman his daughter had become in those 3 precious weeks of freedom. She'd tasted real love, real purpose, real life, and she'd be damned if she'd let him take that away without a fight. Behind them, Dante stood on his empty porch long after the taillights had disappeared, holding the coffee mug Celestine had been drinking from earlier. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, and he closed his eyes, trying to memorize the scent before it faded away forever. Upstairs, Mia called for him, and he wiped his eyes before heading inside to comfort his daughter and pretend that their world hadn't just fallen apart. But even as he tucked Mia back into bed and assured her that everything would be okay, he couldn't shake the feeling that this story wasn't over yet. Love, real love, didn't just disappear because powerful men demanded it. And the woman who had spent 3 weeks proving she was stronger than anyone gave her credit for wasn't likely to go down without a fight.